the very best reason for doing this, I would say, is if people realize how much money is being stolen. We pay 200 billion rand in taxes to the ANC-controlled National Treasury every single year. Through the Division of Revenue Act, we get back a mere 50 billion rand on our local and our provincial allocation.
Wow.
We are losing direct access to 75% of the taxes that we generate in the Western Cape. If we were an independent country, we could cut taxes in half and still have double the amount of money for schools and hospitals and infrastructure and resources. So it's absolutely insane.
Hello, my name is Donald. I'm filling in for Petrus, who's currently trying to cool a nuclear reactor on board a Soviet submarine. This is WorldView, where we explored everyone's perspectives on all things that can broaden our worldview. Today we're talking with Jack Miller. Jack is the leader of the Cape Independence Party. Jack, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Donald. It's a pleasure to be here.
So Jack, can you tell us the Cape Independence Party, how did it arise? What is it trying to achieve?
Well, Cape Independence is something that's, we believe it's embedded in the soil of this territory we call Cape. In 1993, my father was involved with an organization called the Committee for the Cape Republic. And, back then there were deep concerns that the ANC, or the Tripartite Alliance, which consisted of the South African Communist Party and COSATU and obviously the ANC. We know what happens when these types of political organizations seize control. Very dangerous things happen. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. Communism has destroyed many countries around the world. And it was foreboding in 93, 94, where we'd be right here, right now. So I grew up with a deep understanding of the history of the Cape, obviously through family relationships with people in various political organizations. And in 2007, it became very clear to us that our worst fears were coming true. And that was when I took it upon myself to form the Cape Independence Party, or at that point, the Cape Party. And as our name implies, the Cape Independence Party is fighting for Cape independence. And we believe that decentralized political systems just work better for all of its citizens. And so we've been pushing this vision for a very long time. And frankly, it's not something that started in 93, 94 or 2007. And today, I think there's over 7 different organizations calling for Cape independence, which we're very proud of. We're very happy to see so many other voices joining us in this call for independence. And if you look at the history of South Africa, prior to 1910, South Africa did not exist. South Africa is actually not the name of a country. It's a geographical location. Where are we? We're on the continent of Africa, and we're down in the south. So the British Empire, after the Boer Wars, forced us into this false union called the Union of the Bottom of Africa. And I think it's time to change that.
Now, I love that. I mean, it's sort of a hint in the name that we're not really supposed to be a country, because obviously they couldn't really think of something. So they just said, South Africa. I mean, but so with the Cape Party, the Cape Independence Party, would it be accurate to describe it as a libertarian party?
Look, we try to steer away from labels. I think it's very dangerous in today's world to stick too closely to any particular label. We think there are good political policies on the left, and we think there are good political policies on the right. And so we don't look at politics as being left or right, but rather right or wrong. And if you look at the world as a laboratory of different experiments, countries as experiments of what succeeds and what fails, we all agree that unemployment is bad. So which countries around the world have the lowest unemployment? Which countries around the world have the highest employment? We all agree that high standards of living are good. Which countries around the world have the highest standards of living? Which countries around the world have the lowest standards of living? which countries have the highest income per capita, purchasing power per person. And when you collect all of this data together, it's very clear what types of policies work well and what types of policies just don't work. So in a nutshell, to make it simple, we basically, we've looked at all of these experiments around the planet, and quite simply, you need to have a decentralized political system, which is why we look to a country which has survived 2 world wars with different cultural language groups inside its borders, which those same language groups outside those borders were committing genocide in World War I and World War II, Germans, French, Italians. And this country is called Switzerland, and it didn't fire a single bullet in either World War I and World War II. And how could the Italians and the French and the Germans, when their brothers across the border were slaughtering each other, how is it that in that country they remained peaceful and managed to survive those turbulent times? And it's decentralization. We need to devolve power down to local communities. And so in a country like South Africa, where we have different language groups, different cultures, different belief systems, it's exceptionally important to have a decentralized political system. Otherwise, we're going to end up in the same mess that we've seen so many countries around the world get into. So from a political point of view, we look to a system and political policy similar as we see in Switzerland for an independent Cape. And another country which we really like from an economic point of view is Singapore. Singapore in 1965 gained independence, and Lee Kuan Yew took a muddied island with virtually zero resources, also suffered under British imperial colonialism, just like we suffered under British imperial colonialism here in Southern Africa. And Lee Kuan Yew took this country, this muddied island, very few resources, and turned it into one of the strongest economies in the world. And it didn't take very long either. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just look at countries around the world. We see what works and we go, you know what? In an independent Cape, let's do things that work. Let's do things that increase employment. Let's do things that increase income per capita. Let's do things that improve the standards of living in the country. And the Swiss and the Singaporeans have shown us how to do that.
Is the Swiss government, can you describe it as a confederacy?
Yes, absolutely right. You can certainly do that. It's absolutely a confederacy, and each canton is almost like an independent country. They obviously, for very important matters of national and international importance, you'll have a federal body, a governing body that will determine matters like that. For example, let's assume, the Cape was to come under attack from a foreign force. Then all of the municipalities and cantons within the independent Cape would band together to defend our respective communities and territories. But other than that, most politics is absolutely local. And a confederate system where communities decide what language they want to educate their children in, what their tax system should be, just general policies. Communities should have 100% authority to be doing things like this.
So you would almost envision like city-states in the Western Cape. So there's like Cape Town and Stellenbosch, and each one follows its own course.
Yes, I mean, you've got to be conscious of different dynamics in each area and community, but you'll have, for example, the city of Cape Town is incredibly densely populated, and so you'd have to take that into consideration where, for example, the West Coast or the Cape Winelands, or up further north, you have sparse territories which are predominantly farmland, so you'd have to cater for that. You'd have far larger territories inland than you would in the city of Cape Town. So it's not a one size fits all, and you have to be very sensitive to local communities and what they need. And this is what we at the Cape Independence Party have been pushing for a very long time. For example, when the DA mayor Patricia de Lille was, we know one community that we particularly helped out. She wanted to enforce putting a cell phone tower up in front of a little school creche, and the community was in uproar. And they said, we absolutely, the government cannot do this. The DA's run City of Cape Town cannot do this. And Patricia de Lille gave it the rubber stamp and pushed it through. And we had to defend this community in court and to try and have their voice heard and their rights heard. And this is unacceptable. We should not have to get involved in local communities to try and protect them from a government which is supposed to represent the people which put them in power. And in a decentralized political system, the community would decide, yes, we do want a cell phone tower. If we are going to have a cell phone tower, we would like it in this location. We don't want it in front of a school, etc. But it's not something that should be shoved down our throats by a central government. And these are the types of things that flipping the power structure on its head will ensure that democracy, true democracy, is envisioned and is a reality.
Absolutely, but I mean, I've spoken to a person like Rob Davis, who was the former Minister of Trade and a member of the Communist Party. And if he heard you now, he would say, no, that's neoliberal policies. I mean, decentralization, that's not a communist route. And a person like Musa Maimane would say, to get votes in South Africa, you need to go for the social democratic route. Like, you have to talk about inequality, white privilege. What would he say to that?
Well, I mean, these types of belief systems, may have held water in the early 1900s, but I think we're far beyond that point now. If you look around the world, the whole world is moving towards decentralization. I mean, the internet embodies these types of things. And in fact, we envision a very different type of political system in an independent Cape. We should have government 2.0. I mean, all of us have got smartphones with these smart apps. And you're telling me that you can't drive down a road, take a photo of a pothole, send that through to an application where the local administrative body who has transparent records of the taxes which we paid can't go and fix that pothole? That is decentralization. Why must we apply to the central government in Pretoria, 1,000 miles away, for permission to teach with the Afrikaans language in a province in which Afrikaans is the 70% majority spoken language? Why must we have permission to generate our own electricity? We have to be dependent on a government-controlled electricity provider. These things are absolutely absurd, and this is where Musi Maimane and Rob Davis and the various other people who are probably looking after their donors who may benefit from centralized policies like that. This is the common man on the ground doesn't want this. When we push the light switch, we want electricity to go on. When we open up the taps, we want water to come out. When we send our kids to school, we want them to get a proper education. And when you centralize these things, this is what you get. South Africa is the perfect example of what happens when you have communist centralization. So if people want this, they must continue to vote for the ANC and the DA. But if they want to fight against it, well, the Cape Independence Party, we believe we have some solutions.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think communism, not only is it wrong, it's also becoming irrelevant in 2021. It's not really relevant. It doesn't apply in today's society anymore. But I mean, bring it back to Cape Independence Party. What growth have you seen over the last couple of years, and what growth do you hope to see over the next few years?
To be honest, it's been unbelievable. I mentioned earlier that today, I believe there are over 7 different organizations calling for Cape independence. When we started in 2007, the Cape Independence Party was literally the only organization calling for Cape independence on the entire political spectrum and civic spectrum. And fast forward 10 years later, and we started to see more organizations begin to join us. And now today, it's no longer. Yeah, people thought we were crazy in 2007. Literally, people thought we were crazy. I had friends who literally did not think very, very highly of what we were trying to do. It was very controversial at that point in time. It's not controversial anymore. And in fact, hats off to organizations like Phil Craig's CIAG and some polling that they've done, which coincides very well with the polling that we've done in previous years. And in fact, We understand that those numbers are even more profound now than they've ever been before. I'm sure there'll be more information to come out on that shortly, but yeah, what we're seeing is that Cape Independence, certainly amongst the majority party within the Western Cape, which is the DA, 2/3 of DA voters want Cape Independence. 2/3. So the party that is the governing, by far the largest political party in the Western Cape, 2/3 of their supporters want an independent Cape. And so I think it's simply a matter of time before this happens.
Now, we're definitely going to talk about the Democratic Alliance in a bit, but I want to hear from you. Obviously, you've done this for quite a while. What would you say is the best argument to make in favor of Cape Independence? What just stands out? What is the best reason to do this?
There are so many good reasons to make the Cape an independent country. I think, the first thing that we need to talk about is that it's possible. And a lot of people, we often receive response from people saying, what a fantastic idea, but it's never going to happen. I love the idea, but it's a pipe dream. So I think the first thing that people know is that the South African Constitution, the United Nations charters, and the African Union charters, all three of these legal entities to which we are bound signatories, every single one of those provides the right to self-determination. So it's absolutely legal. All we need to do is have a referendum and get 51% in that referendum, and there we go. Then we would have a mandate from the majority of the people in the Western Cape to push for an independent country, and we would then proceed down the pathway towards negotiation. But the very best reason for doing this, I would say, is if people realize how much money is being stolen. We pay 200 billion rand in taxes to the ANC-controlled National Treasury every single year. Through the Division of Revenue Act, we get back a mere 50 billion rand on our local and our provincial allocation.
Wow.
We are losing direct access to 75% of the taxes that we generate in the Western Cape. If we were an independent country, we could cut taxes in half and still have double the amount of money for schools and hospitals and infrastructure and resources. So it's absolutely insane. I think that's the argument which blows it all out the water, and just how the prosperity of every single person living in the Cape would go up tenfold if we were to become an independent country.
So some of the criticism that I've heard to this is that seceding would not necessarily mean things would get better. I mean, why would things not follow the same route as the rest of South Africa if the Western Cape were to secede? Why would things get better necessarily? Why would we not just see a repeat of corruption and those scenarios?
Well, we're fully in favor of remaining within the Union of South Africa, provided that the governing powers that be were to follow a more decentralized political system. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is the complete opposite. We're seeing the ANC in its tripartite alliance with the South African Communist Party and the EFF under Julius Malema driving the country on a national level towards ever more destructive and racist policies. Here in the Cape and the Cape Independence Party, we believe in non-racialism. We believe in a true rainbow nation. We believe we can have a true rainbow nation with the decentralized policies which have made Switzerland so successful, and the economic policies which have made places like Singapore so successful. You combine those three things together, and an independent Cape would be one of the most sought after destinations to live in the world.
Well, it's probably also that the Western Cape is just a much more liberal demographic. So the voters would tend to more conservative or liberal parties, which would lead to a smaller government if you were to secede.
I think that's possible. It is possible that the demographics of the Western Cape would lend itself towards the types of political and economic policies which would raise the standards of living of the population of the Western Cape. But we certainly believe that decentralization is something that would be beneficial to the entire territory of South Africa. And in fact, our surrounding territories too. You know, if you, we're not the only independence movement in South Africa. There's a strong independence movement in KwaZulu-Natal, very strong crowd, the Zulu Nation, who believe that they would be better off controlling their own political affairs. The Abu Tembu tribe in the Eastern Cape is pushing for Eastern Cape independence. Lesotho, the Sothos there believe that they were hard done by the Queen when the British Empire cut up Southern Africa and gave Lesotho an independent country within the borders of South Africa. The same thing with Swaziland, an independent country within the Union of South Africa. So we're not a natural country. And frankly, also the Tswanas in the north of South Africa, there are movements there that would like to actually join with Botswana, because the Tswanas living in Botswana have a higher standard of living than the Tswanas living in South Africa. So I think we would see decentralization benefit so many different groups. The real core enemy here are these centralized political policies in the form of the ANC and the EFF. And frankly, the DA have been useful idiots in their support of these types of policies. And I have a number of good friends in the DA. So, you know, I'll say this exact same thing to them, and they just need to be held to account. And I think that given the right pressure, we can see the DA become a much better party. I think they've lost their way. They've become an ANC light. And we, as the Cape Independence Party, would like to put pressure on them. There's good people in that party, and pull them in the right direction. But right now, they're heading in the wrong direction.
On the issue of Zulu independence, would that entail the entire KwaZulu-Natal or just a specific area that's, I don't know, envisioned, a smaller area?
I haven't looked too closely as to what the Zulu Nation, the exact territory that they envision reclaiming as their own through self-determination. But if one looks at the historical maps of South Africa, these territories are actually quite clearly laid out, and the provinces loosely mirror that, but not exactly. So. For now, if there was to be a referendum in KwaZulu-Natal, it would have to be within the KZN borders. But historical maps are slightly different to that. And if you look at the Cape too, the Western Cape, you know, the previous Cape went many municipalities up into the Northern Cape, and in fact moved across into at least 6 municipalities into the Eastern Cape. So there's definitely room for changing of borders and restructuring of government. And KwaZulu-Natal is at the forefront.
And the Zulu king could do that almost unilaterally because he is a king. So I mean, he could just do it. I've spoken to Dr. Frans Cronje, and he said he doesn't think Cape Independence is going to happen. But he said if the Zulus were to do it, because the Zulu king can do it unilaterally, he thinks then it's entirely possible, because then South Africa would entirely break up as we know it.
Well, I mean, that's funny. I've had conversations with some Zulus who are part of the Zulu Nation, and they've said that they think we're going to get independent before they do. So it's up for debate, but I think there are different political forces at play. And I think if we look at what happened in the previous weeks with the uprisings in KZN, there's definitely a disconnect between the ANC central South African government and the aspirations of the Zulu people in KwaZulu-Natal. So, you know, Frans Cronje could be, he could be right. So KwaZulu-Natal could be the first one to go. I do feel like here in the Western Cape that we've got different traditions. It's almost, we want to achieve the same thing, but for different reasons and through different methods. So, let's see. There are different forces at play. And I think we could all go simultaneously. I think if KZN was to go, or the Western Cape was to go, or the Abu Tembus in the Eastern Cape, I think we could see within a matter of months many territories choosing self-determination.
So I've spoken to Phil Gregg, and he said the interesting thing that the people that support independence are not naturally in Cape Town. They are more in the rural areas. Is that true? Are the demographics of the people that support Cape independence, are they more rural people? Are they perhaps more inclined to be colored people instead of white people?
Look, I've got to say that the support that we've seen for Cape Independence has been pretty widespread. You know, it may fluctuate in certain areas, different income groups, etc., but you pretty much will see tremendous support across the demographics, across rural and urban environments. I mean, 70% of the Cape population is in Cape Town, and there is a huge amount of support for Cape Independence right here in Cape Town. I haven't seen Phil Craig's the exact data that he's talking about, but there's a lot to feel very positive about. I think it's simply a matter of time.
And okay, so let's the next national election, the DA falls below 50% in the Western Cape, and they want to now find coalition partners. And there's the Cape Independence Party. What would your ultimatum be to join this coalition? Would it be a referendum?
Yes, we need to hold the DA to account, and for too long they have tried to kowtow towards central ANC policies to try and eat into the ANC electorate. And our first step would be, well, we need to all realize that none of this is possible with a DA over 50%. If the DA gets 51% or more, Cape Independence is not going to happen. The DA has to be driven underneath 50%. Helen Zille, Alan Winde, John Steenhuisen have all come out in opposition to Cape Independence. And so the only way that the 2/3 majority of DA supporters who believe in Cape Independence and continue to vote for the DA under John Steenhuisen, Helen Zille, and Alan Winde are voting for a leadership which are not in favor of a policy that those 2/3 believe in. So if we want to see the DA held to account and to put forward policies that the vast majority of their supporters want to see, then we're going to have to force them into a corner to accept a number of various possibilities. The first is decentralization. So those 2/3 of the DA voters that believe in Cape Independence, they're going to have to move their votes away from the DA in order to get the DA underneath 50%. If we have the DA at 49, 48, 47%, and the Cape Independence Party is sitting at 2, 3, 4, 5%, with that 5% and the DA's 47% or so, we would then go to the DA and say, listen, we will give you the majority. You can have the mayorship, you can have the premiership position. However, we have been slave to ANC policy for too long. And in order for us to give you this majority, what you need to do is give the people of the Western Cape a referendum on certain decentralized policies. We need to take power back down to the province. Following that, or if they are not willing, we would then move to the next phase, which would be a referendum on complete independence. And we would literally create a political gridlock. No one would have majority power within the Western Cape until our demands were met. And those demands would be a referendum on granting the people of the Western Cape their democratic right to a referendum on Cape Independence. And only then would we allow the DA to have a majority.
You've spoken of Cape Independence support within the Democratic Alliance. Is it really only the leadership that's against this? Is there quite, amongst the party members themselves, is there quite a support for this?
Yes, absolutely. My personal discussions with a number of DA fairly high up in the leadership, there's a lot of support for this, but it's almost quiet behind closed doors. And as our polling has shown, and as Phil Craig's polling has shown, we have seen that 2/3 of DA supporters are in favor of Cape independence. So there's a clear disconnect between DA voters and DA leadership. And what voters are going to have to wake up and realize that if we want to see this vision become a reality, and frankly, we're getting to the point where it has to become a reality sooner rather than later, if we are to have any hope of saving the collapse that the country is going through. And the only way that we can do that is by taking those votes away from the DA leadership. We obviously, we hope to present ourselves to those DA voters and say that, listen, as the Cape Independence Party, we guarantee you, we promise you that with the kingmaker position, with the DA underneath 50%, we will ensure that the DA will grant you a referendum on decentralized powers down to the province, and furthermore, a referendum on Cape independence. And the only way that will happen is if DA voters shift their vote to the Cape Independence Party.
Yeah, I personally believe now is actually an opportune moment for Cape independence because of the chaos in the rest of the country. Now everyone's like, I don't even care about the ideals of whatnot. I mean, I just want to get away from there. And I think actually you have like a 5 to 10 year window to do this. Otherwise, things are going to get slowly better again. And then like the frog boiling in the water, people are going to say, oh, things are getting better again. We don't need this anymore. So now is the best time to do this. But
Yes.
do you think the Democratic Alliance is too focused on the union buildings? Is that the reason why they don't really want to pursue this?
You're 100% right. They are too focused on the union buildings. They've lost touch with their roots. And there's an important thing that we need to realize, where the Cape Independence Party is different to the DA, to the ACDP, to the Freedom Front, to all of these parties which are perceived to be opposition to the ANC. Where the Cape Independence Party is different is that we get 100% of our votes right here in the Western Cape. The DA gets 30% of their votes here in the Western Cape. The DA gets 70% of their votes outside of Western Cape borders. And so the problem with us voters and citizens and taxpayers is that we look at political parties as being these moral entities which fight for visions. And unfortunately, with a lot of these centralized national parties, they are essentially a business. The DA is a business. The Freedom Front is a business. And these parties are seeking to get as many votes as they can get, regardless of which province they're in. And as a result of that, they will have to sacrifice certain values. We at the Cape Independence Party are 100% custom built to fight for the interests of the people right here in the Western Cape. The other party that I mentioned, Freedom Front, 93% of their votes come from outside of the Western Cape. A mere 7% of Freedom Front voters live in the Western Cape. So here you have the DA with 70% of their votes outside of the Western Cape. You have the Freedom Front with 93% of their votes outside of the Western Cape. And the Cape Party with 0% of our votes outside of the Western Cape. 100% of our votes right here. I think it's very clear that if people want to see Cape independence happen, we certainly look forward to working in a coalition with parties that are loosely like-minded with ourselves. We believe that the DA has got a number of good policies that we certainly can support. The Freedom Front, ACDP, there are policies there that we will certainly work together with them on. But when it comes to this critical matter, the most critical matter of pushing for a referendum on Cape independence, the Cape Independence Party is the vehicle to do that.
No, just to be fair to the Freedom Front Plus, I think if there were to be independence tomorrow in the Western Cape, most of those 93% would come here to the Western Cape. I think that's one of the reasons why they support Cape independence. But so if a referendum were to be held tomorrow, do you think it will win? And if it's not going to win, what can we do to boost the support for Cape independence?
it's very difficult to say what the percentages would be if the referendum would be tomorrow. So if we were to play this hypothetical game, an election doesn't just happen overnight. One needs to have the electoral, an independent electoral body set up the process by which the election will take place. And that takes many months of organization. There needs to be marketing and advertising behind what this election is about. In this case, it would be a referendum on Cape Independence. We discussed earlier, there are many people that say they love the idea, but they don't believe it's possible. They think it's a pipe dream. Now, all of a sudden, if we have the IEC, for example, setting up this referendum vote on Cape Independence, all of those people which have said to us, we love the idea, but it's a pipe dream, it's never going to happen. These people get a letter in the post saying there will be a referendum in 6 months' time on this date, and you have the option to vote yes for Cape Independence or no for no Cape Independence. Now, all of a sudden, these people that have been sitting on the fence have a real tangible option to choose Cape Independence. So where some of the polling numbers which we've seen and the CIAG have seen, it looks very close. We're at around about that 50% mark. I think we would see us exceed that 50% mark, given the fact that the process of a referendum would actually begin to take place. Obviously, then we would also have the various entities in favor or against putting forward their marketing campaigns. And I think that the marketing campaign for Cape Independence is infinitely more powerful than the marketing campaign against Cape Independence.
I mean, the ANC is just going to screw that up.
Absolutely, exactly. And I think, with 6 months of sending marketing material to the various areas around the Western Cape and saying, look, this is how we can improve the lives of every single citizen, regardless of skin color, regardless of language group, regardless of belief system, living in the Western Cape. We can improve the lives of those people. I think it'll be a slam dunk. And with marketing behind it, I think we'll see us move from 50% to well over 50%, and an independent Cape will become a reality.
Do you think it would be a smart idea to somehow get independent observers from the rest of the world that can just, in case the ANC says, oh, there was army soldiers that, I don't know, pull people to vote or whatever, just to get a few independent observers just to confirm the results?
That is an absolute prerequisite. Yeah. We'd have to have independent observers from various different countries around the world. And we may even want to have multiple different electoral organizations conducting it. We would have to have entry polls and exit polls. There'd have to be polling done before, polling done after. And there would have to be a paper record of all votes that took place. And potentially also in today's day and age, we have the possibility of a blockchain record of voting taking place. So I think with multiple layers of security into this, multiple different eyes on the ballots, and a paper record or blockchain digital record showing how people exactly voted, and perhaps even a form of correlating the ID number to the ballot, that voters themselves can verify that their vote was recorded and recorded in the way that they represented in that ballot booth, is something that would be a prerequisite. So 100% entirely right. If we're going to do this, it'll have to be the most well-run election we've probably ever had, because the IEC does a decent job, but there have been things in the past which could have been done a lot better. And I think in this case, in such an important matter as a referendum on Cape Independence, we would certainly have international observers and multiple entities ensuring that the vote was free and fair.
Absolutely. Well, Jack, I see our time is running up, but I mean, this has been a fascinating conversation. I want to give you one last opportunity to plug, say, or add anything you want to.
Well, it's been great chatting to you, Donald, and I think to all of your listeners and your viewers, we've got elections coming up very soon. We would urge anyone who is not already hasn't signed up with the Cape Independence Party to please go to our website www.capeparty.com and to sign up, to join, to pledge your support for Cape Independence, to spread the word. And we've got a lot of campaigning to do in these upcoming weeks. So if people would like to stand as candidates, or if there are already candidates in their respective areas, if they would please support those candidates and go on flyer drives. Most weekends will be at various intersections, handing out flyers, talking to communities, spreading this message of Cape Independence. So that's where we are right now. If people can go to our website, go to our social media pages, and join us, tell their friends to join us, and spread the word. Because as you said, Donald, the time is now. It's time. We need to make the Cape an independent country. And the sooner we build enough support behind this, the sooner we can get out of the sinking ship called South Africa. I don't think anyone wants to see what happened in KZN and Gauteng a few weeks ago happen here in our beloved Cape. So if we don't want to see our supermarkets burning down and people being shot in the streets, we deserve better here in the Cape. And we can have that with an independent Cape. And we at the Cape Independence Party guarantee and ensure that we will fight tooth and nail for that referendum on Cape Independence.
Well, thank you, Jack. You've heard it there, folks. Go out and register, be part of the future. If you've made it this far, please consider liking this video, sharing it as widely as possible, and subscribing to our channel. My name is Donald. This has been WorldView.